Women in STEM WiST network. That's what we've called ourselves. We're part of Technocamps. Technocamps is a wonderful project. It's a project that is there to upskill across Wales. And I just thought I'd just show you by pictures rather than too many words from me. And I'll do it really quickly with a bit of luck. Can you see that? I call it more than a project. It's not just one thing. Look at all these brands. Whoops, got to go too fast. There's all the brands that are involved with us. So we've got teaching, we've got clubs, we've got Playground Computing and the Institute of Coding. Lots of things going on there. One of the main things that we're doing is working under some WEFO and ESF funding project. And the project is a massive project, 5.3 million over 3 years, European funding, to go into secondary schools and upskill across all of this area of Wales. I told you this is going to be fast, so you have to keep up with me. We've also got Welsh Government funding to go into primary schools and work with primary school children and to train some teachers. We're working with all the universities across Wales. In this particular area, we're working with Bangor, USW, Swansea, Glyndŵr and Cardiff. Fantastic to be working with all of them. With the business engagement, which this is part of, we're working with the Institute of Coding in Wales. And we've got the degree apprenticeships that we work on, which link us with industry and offer fully funded degree apprenticeships. Our main thing, and one of our main things, is to really encourage the girls, to really encourage girls to go into science, technology, engineering and maths. Working with children, as I've said, starting young, working with teachers. Working on the coding clubs, I missed that one out. That's all the teachers that we've trained under one of our qualifications that we do. These are the coding clubs that we run, or the competitions that we run. And they're really to upskill children to really understand computer science, to understand technology from grassroots up. And we've got some great ambassadors, and hopefully we'll pick up some new ambassadors today and some new role models from all that we're doing. We do some great events. This event has been running for 20 years. It was our 20th celebration this year. We managed to sneak it under the radar fortunately, before COVID put a kibosh on all events. But we managed to just fit that in March, just before everything started to go a bit pear-shaped. Do some great competitions. There's the degree apprenticeships that I mentioned, fully funded degree apprenticeships, I should say. There's no cost to the company or to the individual, all fully funded by Welsh Government. And this is a new thing that we've started. Why are we doing this? We're trying to encourage girls to take up STEM. And we're trying to do this by building a lovely network of women who can go in and show that disconnect. There's a disconnect in school between what a career is in technology or in science or in engineering or in maths, and what's the actual subject that's being taught in schools. So to pull that disconnect together, what we really want is for some of the women from today to really go back into schools and to communicate the lovely careers that you've had and the jobs that you're doing. We've had some great success with young people, and over the summer we did a really great campaign where we engaged with 265 children across Wales in a Summer of STEM campaign to encourage them to think about science in a fun way. A lot of what we do, technology, so that's a project. Our main budget funder is the European Social Fund, but Welsh Government supports us and the universities. They're an amazing team, and we're doing loads of great things. I just thought I'd give you a little bit of introduction for those who don't know what Technocamps is. A bit quick, but there it is. Because today is not really about me, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. It's a networking meeting. It's about all of you in the room. If you can switch your cameras on, it's lovely to see your faces, so please join us in the room. Hi, Wendy, good to see you. Good to see so many familiar faces as well. It's really good. So we're going to, I'm going to hand over now to our speaker. If you want to put the slide up, Casey, and I'll introduce our lovely speaker, Harriet, who's in the room with us, who nearly wasn't in the room with us because the NHS system nearly prevented her from joining us. This beautiful picture of Harriet. Harriet is from NHS Wales Informatics, and she's going to share with us today about all the wonderful things that are going on in the NHS. She's going to talk to us for a little while, and when she's spoken to us, then we're going to go into breakout rooms, and you can have a chance to think about what she said and the takeaways that you've got from it. So when she's talking, think about what that means to you, what difference that's going to make to you, and in all the changes that have gone on in the NHS. And there's been plenty of those. Okay, over to you, Harriet.
Thank you, Julie, for inviting me to talk today on this wet and windy Friday. The dogs are in the shed with my husband. I've put a do not disturb sign on the door, so fingers crossed we won't be disturbed. And I'd also like to mention that I'm working off 2 screens today, so please bear with me if I break eye contact from time to time. And I am still a little bit jangly because of the last minute technical glitch, so bear with me while I settle in. So my name's Harriet Stone, and I'm the Business Change Manager in the NHS Wales Informatics Service, NWIS. And I joined in 2016, and my boss is on the call. Or my boss until recently, Wendy Deering, is here, and she's actually responsible for me joining NHS Wales Informatics. So just by way of a little bit of background, prior to this, I worked in Tata Steel in a number of roles. The most recent of those was as a change agent for the mindsets and behaviours and voice of the customer work streams. Here I was lucky enough to be mentored by, for sort of nearly 18 months by a team of McKinsey's consultants who had been employed to deliver the future of steel, and collectively our goal was to deliver £300 million in savings to the business. So why did I join NWIS? Well, that is thanks to Wendy, as I've just said, who was until recently our head of workforce and OD. So in 2016, Wendy made the brave decision to change the way in which NWIS was providing training to our customers in the wider NHS. The landscape and the timescales had changed significantly, and therefore traditional classroom-based training was no longer delivering what our customers needed in good time or to the numbers that we needed to deliver it to. So, and we'd also acknowledged, I think, that whilst we were working with a customer, we needed to get much closer to them and engage with them in their places of work in order to truly understand their environment and current ways of working. We needed to do this so that we could sort of meaningfully transition them into the new digital space. So I joined in October 2016, and I joined a small team of newly appointed business change facilitators, who I like to call change agents. And all of these, luckily, had been NWIS trainers prior to that. And I must say at this point that their knowledge and experience was really invaluable to me in my first couple of months there, because they helped me navigate the complexities of the business, its function, and our customers. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about NHS Wales Informatics. They were established in 2010, and they had the responsibility to develop, deliver, and support the health and care technology used throughout Wales. Today, we're helping NHS Wales meet this challenge of 21st digital healthcare by developing innovative systems that are produced with the developers, but in collaboration with the clinicians, that voice of the customer piece. We develop dedicated software and hardware, and we support this. We are improving information set sharing across the board with big data, and we are introducing online services for patients, and we are developing, again thanks to Wendy, future generations of healthcare IT specialists. In simplistic terms, I would describe us as the IT branch of the NHS. There are hundreds of legacy systems out in health boards and local authorities and trusts. And whilst we do host a lot of these still, our primary goal is to develop and host national IT systems, websites, data centres, etc., which support and also support the health boards and local authorities to migrate or connect to our national architecture and infrastructure. So what are our challenges? Well, there are lots. but I've picked out the main ones. And as I've just alluded to, the legacy systems, they're disparate and they don't talk to each other. But what does this mean? What this means is that information could not be shared across health board boundaries. So our other challenges would include the business change, both cultural and technical. Access to clinical staff, they're really, really busy, and getting time with them to understand what they need is really challenging, which is why we go to them. The all Wales logistics, our customers are spread out right across Wales, and getting to them and working with them in a timely manner is always a challenge. There are multiple hardware and software variations, the infrastructure, and also that bit about obtaining agreement about what everybody wants when we're migrating them into that national space is really hard. That decision by committee that we all have to work around and through in order to get that consensus and be able to move on to the development sort of phase of things. So I don't have time to talk to you about the 80+ systems, websites, etc. that we host. So I just thought I'd give you a quick overview of one of our flagship systems, which is the Welsh Clinical Portal. So as you know, what we're trying to do and what the Welsh Government's remit is that we do things once for Wales. And we have developed in-house a single digital health record, which is called the Welsh Clinical Portal. And this is for clinicians, this is how they access your patient record. So all health boards have access to the Welsh Clinical Portal, but usage and the functionality that they have will depend on where the health boards are in their implementation. So what this system does is it provides access cross-boundary, an all Wales view of things such as the Welsh GP record. So if you're in secondary care in hospitals, you can see the GP record for the patient. You can see test results, which you can imagine is really valuable. It might be that they've just had a test in primary or somewhere else in secondary care, but then they present in ED, and now clinicians can have a look at those test results. And also associated documents, reports, and images for things like radiology are also available. So this is really important, but what does it mean? It means that finally the information follows the patient and is available to clinicians wherever care is provided. And clinicians therefore are able to make informed decisions with the latest information at their fingertips. GPs can send electronic referrals instead of it taking days via post, and secondary care can now electronically discharge patients. I don't remember, do you remember the yellow sheets you used to get given if you were in hospital and you had to go and take it to your GP? Well, now that happens electronically. And also from a customer experience perspective, because there is access to things such as test results, if you present somewhere in an emergency environment, potentially, or say for instance in a new GP surgery, they won't have to repeat tests and re-bleed you. So again, this is just a whistle-stop tour of some of the other things that we're supporting. So information standards, this is a core set of terms, an information standard, which means really that things are called the same thing across Wales. And this is enabling comparative data analysis. And then there's the WCP mobile app, so that's the Welsh Clinical Portal again, but this means that clinicians have it on their mobile devices, and they will, for instance, receive a notification on their mobile device when a test result is available. E-documents, this is a massive piece of work where we are standardising the documentation and then migrating it from paper to digital. Then there's the Welsh Community Care Information System. This is bridging the gap between health and social care. Cancer informatics. This is the migration from legacy systems into the national platform. WEDS, which is the Welsh Emergency Department System. Speaks for itself, I think. And then there's a huge mobilisation piece where handheld medical devices are being deployed and are supporting treatment and consultation at the bedside. NHS Wales, which is a patient-facing platform, and that's where you're going to be able to find expert advice from trusted sources around your healthcare. And again, this will grow over time. Our dream is one day that you'll be plugging devices that you use at home into this platform, and that will be able to update your patient record, but that's quite a way off, but that's the vision. And then our latest project is WICIS, which is the Welsh Intensive Care Information System. And this is the digitisation of the paper processes in ITU. And this also, what we want to is interface the equipment into the system, so that there isn't this piece of work that happens where people are translating the information that's set out in on the equipment and putting it onto paper. So that again will save lots of time, and it will be far more efficient and less prone to error. So we're starting on that now. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and take a breath, and I'm going to ask you to read this slide from Sally Cox, who talks about what big data does far better than I ever would. So now we're going to get on to actually what the business change team does, and that's really focusing on the people side of change. But why do we need to focus on the people side of change? Did you know that 70% of digital transformations fail, mainly because the required change is not supported? So this is stats that were gathered from McKinsey's, but have been further supported by organisations that work in the healthcare environment, such as the King's Fund. So the data is that approximately 38 of digital transformations, approximately 38% of digital transformation failure is attributed to resistance, employee resistance. And then a further 32% of that is actually attributed to senior leadership's not role modelling belief and supporting the change. And then the other 30% is made up, ironically, of the areas that, if we're not careful, projects spend a lot of their time focusing on. So resources, budgets, logistics, technical challenges, hardware and software. But it's my experience that it doesn't matter how good the system is, if you haven't gone through the process of preparing people for that change, then it will be resisted because people fear the unknown. So that's where the business change team come in, because we spend all of our time in that space. So I just wanted to share a little tool that I use a lot with you quickly. So this is called the influence model. And again, it was something that I started to use when I worked in Tata. And I'll just tell you quickly how I use it. So 4 elements need to be in place for individuals to change their behaviours. And this is broken down into these quadrants. So role modelling, and that would be the 32% that I was just talking to you about. So that is around us seeing that our superiors and peers are behaving in this new way, and that new way is being role modelled and endorsed and sometimes enforced by senior leadership. And then there's that fostering understanding and conviction, which is sort of, I understand what is being asked of me and it makes sense. And that's around the 38% of resistance that's shown. And then there's these structures and processes and systems being right and being able to support the new changes. And then there's the final and really important bit, which is again a space where the business change team works a lot in, which is that I have the skills and the competencies to behave in the new way. So the way that I use this is when I'm out and about and I'm talking to people, when somebody says something interesting that I want to relay back or capture, I write it on a Post-it, and then I come back and I stick it on a big poster-sized version that I have of this. And by doing that, I can see very, very quickly what people are telling me in what spaces. And then I use this in what I call a mirror workshop environment, where I'm able to feed back to the senior stakeholders and say, this is sort of the gap analysis around the behaviours and how people are feeling about what's happening to them. And then together we can address what we feel are the gaps from a digital transformation people perspective. And more interestingly, again, what I do then is, if you were to use, say, for instance, a different colour Post-it, I can then mirror that back to the workforce and say, so I've spoken to your senior stakeholders and this is what they feel they can do to combat the gaps in these areas. And it becomes sort of a quick communication and feedback tool. So I just thought that you might find that interesting. So now I'd like to just talk to you about what the National Change Team comprises of and what we do. So the Business Change Team, which is now sitting in service transformation, deploy business change facilitators pre, during and post implementation to help organisations transition to new ways of working. And then we've got the e-learning team, the e-design team, and they engage with the national and regional clinicians and project teams right from the get-go to create national user-friendly e-learning modules. And we build these with our customers for our customers. And I should mention here that we're very mindful of the environment in which the end user is going to view our videos. So they would be short, sharp, bespoke and very specific, so that somebody could potentially watch a video about on something, yes, I remember how to do it, and then they go back to their day job. And our aim is always to role model the best practice way of using the system, so we're always iterating and upgrading our e-learning in line with the system upgrades. And then there's another bit that we do, which is where we increase the cross-functional communication with visual management by designing collaborative tools that visualize our goals, and also the tools will track and enhance performance. And this helps to focus the organization on what our prioritizations are by way of delivery against our annual plan. And then the last thing that we do is we're always in discovery on one system or another, or for instance, most recently in Microsoft Office 365, where we are trialing and fiddling with apps and functionality within systems, finding out how they work, bottoming out any vulnerabilities, and then we cascade that learning to the wider workforce. And most recently, the big game changer for us has been Teams, because we can now buffer that and bolster that with live streams, and then we video those live streams like we're doing now, and then we are able to post those recording, which means that when people miss stuff, they can see the end-to-end training process. And sometimes it's in a meeting environment and it's interactive, and sometimes it's a live stream. But we're constantly learning and then rolling those learnings out. And now we can do that far quicker. So I just wanted to quickly give you an overview of our delivery model, and you'll see that there's a big red ring around the outside that's got engagement, 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 and that is really to depict how much we value how much engagement we must do in order to make sure that whatever we're doing is collaborative, and that we're taking our end users on that journey through the project cycle. So I think in 4 phases. So there's the diagnostic phase, which is establishing the as-is state. And here we are moving mostly in the end user experience space and the qualitative space, but we are baselining what we're doing there. So we're surveying, we're doing day in the life of activities, we're analysing existing data, and also if these people aren't first in an implementation, if we have any demonstrations that we can show them, we will. We support our colleagues with roadshows, and we are potentially training at this point, but we're definitely scoping and starting to look at what the e-learning looks like. Then there's design stage, where we are firming all of this up and we're designing our engagement plan, and we are designing and building our e-learning. And then there's the implementation phase, where if we've done our job properly and our prep is sound, then lots of our end users will already be comfortable and have awareness of this new system, which means that we are then mostly out and about with the last minute training and supporting our customers at ground level, in wards, etc., in these go live activities. And we're also acting as a conduit at this point, where we're on the shop floor, and if there's any problems or glitches, we're able to feedback very quickly into NWIS and get these things fixed as quickly as possible. And then we get on to the beast that is sustain. So this to me is always the hardest but most important part of an implementation, because we know that there's always a tendency for people to revert back to known ways of working if they can. So we've got to be still out and about there, making sure that people are okay, but also at this point we're doing that evaluation. How was the implementation? What could we do better next time? We would be revisiting all of the baselining that we did to measure our efficacy, the success of the project, and then also what we're doing is just looking at data to see how people are using the systems and if they're using them correctly, and then we would deploy, but we would then deploy on a much more targeted basis, so we're helping people migrate comfortably and stay in that new space. But it's a slog. Sustain is just about good old-fashioned getting out there and just repeating and repeating and repeating and providing comfort until people are comfortable in that new space. So this is just a bit of visual management. I love visual management, and I think that it speaks 1,000 words, and also is an opportunity for people to absorb in their own time. This is actually the workload of the business change from Q3 onwards. So you can see some of the systems in there that I've already mentioned. Big ticket items, things such as Microsoft 365. There's a lot happening in the Welsh Patient Administrations there in red, because we are working on the new cancer stuff. And also there's the NHS Change Ambassador Certificate that I'm going to tell you about. But there's also in the dark blue, Test, Trace, Protect, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And that big blue line right around the outside is all the things that we're working on regarding the Welsh Clinical Portal. So we've got a big workload, and we tackle this by being organised and working with our customers, and therefore plan effectively. So an acronym buster. So I think that Julie's going to share this slide, so I just wanted to leave you with this information. We are drowning in acronyms in NWIS, and we do, wherever possible, try and make sure that people know what systems we're talking about. But there's also a lovely picture there that is a very high-level view of the spaces that we're working in. So we've got the GP practices, primary care, we've got your patient home there, where there's digital solutions that you can use, such as Choose Pharmacy and My Health Online. We've got the secondary care setting with some branches off of there that we're also working in, although I should say at that point that lots of these clinics and things do exist within that hospital space. And then we've got the data warehouse, where all of our big data lives, and then we've got the care in the community, the social care aspect, and then there's our building. A really good, Chloe created this, so that's actually what our building looks like. So that you'll be able to look again in your own time. So now I'm just going to talk about a little bit about what the business change team have been doing during the COVID pandemic. So whilst the majority of NWIS were working at home, there was a requirement still for the business change team to go out into the community. But this time it was to help to set up the COVID test units. So I'll just take you through the detail of some of those bullet points now in these next slides. So there's a picture, I don't know whether you heard Terry, but there she is there, the top right, she's on the call today. And as you can see on that picture there, that's the stadium, and it was just a patch of green grass when we all rocked up there with Public Health Wales and other organisations that were helping to set this up. So there are 24 test centres, and Business Change have supported 14 of them. And as you can see, we were rolling out electronic test requesting that sits in the Welsh Clinical Portal. And we trained very quickly over 218 users and 38 for the lateral flow aspect of it, which is the antibody testing. And up until the point where we had, we stopped providing physical ground support, over 2,844,000 electronic test requests had been processed. That's a mouthful, isn't it? They actually represented 91% of all requests sent to the Welsh Laboratory Information Management System, WLIMS as we call it. And here's a little evidence of a bit of our baselining, our benchmarking, is that we only gathered data there until the point that we stopped providing physical support, so we could measure our efficacy there. And then there were 10,500 lateral flow body antibody tests carried out whilst we were supporting this. And we continue to provide on-call remote telephone service and Microsoft Teams support as and when they need us. So this is the list of sites that we have supported. Some of it was a very light touch, and others, as I've just mentioned, like Cardiff City Stadium, were a full build. And I don't want to give the impression that we did this by ourselves, but we provided support for these. And this graph that you can see depicts the shift from paper testing at the very beginning to the electronic test requesting via the Welsh Clinical Portal that took place. So why did we need to change from paper to electronic test requesting? Well, there was a small army needed to write out the manual forms that were needed to process the people coming through these CTUs. And the fact that they were handwritten was impacting on the data quality that the lab was receiving. So illegible handwriting could have resulted in, sometimes did result in a small amount of errors. When they migrated into electronic test requesting, what this enabled the team to do was create the forms ahead of the citizens arriving, or quickly when they did arrive. And that meant that the lab were able to manage their staffing levels because they could see the numbers of tests being generated. So this made the whole thing a lot more efficient, and there was visibility throughout the process. And of course, it did, for the most part, eliminate the number of transcription errors that might have taken place. So we're very proud of this. And then I just thought I'd just speak briefly about why I think the business change team was successful during COVID. And I think that's mostly because of the best practice recommendations we made for optimum workflow. So we weren't just influencing how they used and training on the electronic test requesting. We also helped them think about the process flow of patients right from the car park to when they exited. And we did this because we've got tried and tested practices from our own experience and from other health boards to standardise processes. And because we were working with lots of CTUs, we carried these forward to new sites. We already had a lot of contacts, and we built trust and relationships, and we leveraged all of these when we were working with the CTUs. And we drew on them for information and also availability of resources. Sometimes a printer was missing and didn't work, so somebody from client services scooted out very quickly and helped us. Or we knew we were going to run out of labels, so we phoned around till we found them. So all of this meant that there wasn't things didn't come to a standstill, and we were able to keep the flow going. And then finally, our interpersonal skills. So we're always going into new environments, and we often work under pressure. So we were comfortable with this, and we felt that because we were calm and collected, I hope we reassured people and we provided comfort. And then they also then had the comfort following that, because we shared our personal email, our work email addresses, our work mobile numbers, and they could contact us on Teams. So they knew that they had this ongoing support. And I think that generally people are much more likely to try something new or stick with something new if they know that they've got that support when they need it. So just a little bit about the GPs. So we granted GPs access to the All Wales view of the Welsh Clinical Portal. But why was this important? It was important because at the same time we were enabling GPs to work from home remotely. But of course they didn't have paper notes when they were working from their homes. So being able to access the portal meant that they could see their patients' records without needing to refer to their patient notes. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that they could see everything, but certainly they were able to see what was in the portal, which they fed back has been extremely beneficial. And again, we continue to provide second line support for that. So we've got permissions to remote access into GPs, desktops with them there, obviously, and we can help them navigate the portal. We also trained them via Teams or one-to-one, and we were able to help them with the first time registration. Another thing that I'm especially proud of on behalf of the Business Change team is that Sam Prosser in our e-learning team was the Mura subject matter expert, which is a content management system, and he built, along with with the advice of the comms team, our clinical director and our chief operating officer, the NWIS website basically from scratch. This was in order to make sure that we were able to provide up-to-health guidance and support for COVID. But he also delivered online training sessions. As you can see here, 63 users attended the first 3 sessions in August. And we continue to publish and maintain this website, but we also have got special areas for the live streams for Teams, and it means, and we've also uploaded all of our learning into this space, which means that it's increased the accessibility for our NHS colleagues. This is a list of all the quick reference guides that we've built that are directly associated with enhanced, modified or new functionality available in the Welsh Clinical Portal. And the reason why we had to build guides, and this is paper versions, was because we realised very quickly that not everybody was going to have access to the kit that they needed to view our e-learning videos. So by giving people the capability of printing these guides, they could do their work but refer to something, but also if they moved from site to site, they could take these guides with them, which they've fed back has been extremely helpful. And then this is the list of the e-learning videos that our e-learning team have developed. Again, this is all to do with new functionality that's been developed in the portal to support the COVID crisis. And also we've developed e-learning videos for the Welsh Patient Administration System. So whilst we needed to help clinicians work in this new space, we also needed to help all the administrators of the system. So how are they going to set up virtual clinics, for instance? And then once a patient had attended the virtual clinic, how are they going to capture the output of this clinic now that they weren't in the hospital environment? So we've done lots of work in this space too. And now we come on to test, trace and protect. So again, something that we're very, very proud of in NWIS. I don't know whether you're aware, but from conception to delivery, it took 40 days for us to develop this entire service. And we didn't do it on our own. Again, I need to stress that Public Health Wales were involved. We had lots of stakeholders involved in this, but NWIS led on this. And Neil, our e-learning lead, was the subject matter expert for this because he built the e-learning. Therefore, as he went along, he understood the mechanics of it. And thanks to his technical knowledge, he was also able to interrogate the back end of test, trace, protect, and has found glitches and has tested the system extensively. So we were able to deliver an entire suite of e-learning within the first week of go live, and that was for the three main categories of tracers that use the service. And actually, we've trained very quickly over 1,285 tracers up to the 6th of the 7th, which was when it first dropped. And we are now going into new iterations of the service. Therefore, all the e-learning is being updated and training will commence to upskill those people already tracing on this, but also the new members of staff. But again, excellent feedback received from this, and it's been a huge undertaking, and people have worked evenings and weekends for days and days on end to deliver this for the citizens of Wales. So Microsoft 365, the Business Change team went into discovery for this last July, started rolling it out to NWIS in November, and then we had to massively accelerate this rollout because we got rumblings. We knew from watching the news, etc., that COVID was coming, so we knew that probably our workforce might need to work remotely, so we accelerated the rollout, and it did mean actually that people undocked, I think, on the weekend before the 23rd of March, went home and seamlessly migrated into the remote way of working. And we continue to support NWIS by constantly learning about new functionality, updates, and thanks to the functionality of Microsoft 365, we can record quick videos, we can highlight vulnerabilities around confidentiality, etc. And we do all this really, really quickly because of the apps that we have access to. And then what happened was we needed to help the wider NHS to also get the most out of Microsoft 365. So we were asked to extend our rollout to the Welsh tenancy, which is actually 110,000 people, I believe. And I should explain at this point that different health boards were coming onto this at different times. But what we did was offer for a period, I think 6 weeks, Microsoft stream sessions where we demonstrated the functionality and the best practice use of these apps. And as you can see from the list, up until the 11th of the 6th, when we stopped running these sessions, nearly 1,800 people were trained by Mike Jones and Carl Robson in NWIS, who belong to the Business Change team. But we continue to provide support, and any videos that we make that we feel are applicable to the wider NHS, we share with the national rollout team. I'm just going to stop talking again for a moment for you just to read a few of the testimonials that we've received regarding the CTU, TTP, and from the Welsh Government. We have qualifications in informatics. This again was started with Wendy and our partners in Trinity and University of South Wales. So we have full qualifications from level 2 to PhD. And the last thing was that we've developed our own Change Ambassador certificate within NWIS, which tackles the cultures and behaviours and breeds our own change ambassadors. And this will be coming soon and will be available wider. And I finished.
Wow. Not much going on there then, maybe, Harriet?
No, just
not much at all. Thank you so much. Thank you, Harriet, for sharing all of that stuff. That was amazing. So much going on, such a ridiculous amount of stuff happening, and right across Wales. You've been very, very, very busy in the team, I can see.
Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Harris. I work for Swansea University as a Senior Project and Change Officer. So my question comes from sort of that side of things, the change management. So looking at the influence model and particularly the mirror workshop environments, I'd love to hear more about how they can be facilitated in this sort of virtual world. Are these something that you feel need to be done face to face, or have you got an experience of where they've worked really well online? And if so, how did you go about doing that?
So there's the functionality of whiteboard that we use that you can scribble on, which is working quite well, because I think the most important, so the reason why the mirror workshop is so important is because whenever we go out and engage, we'll always start with sort of the cathartic conversations, and I've already told somebody all of this, and why is nobody listening to me? So, the reason why it's important is that people want to see that you've captured their feedback and that they recognize their own words when they see it, because they don't want somebody telling somebody else what they think you said. And then that feedback mechanism, then when you can take it to the senior managers and they can see the senior manager has acted on it, and then it goes back to them. So it's that constant loop of consultation. But yeah, ideally it should be face to face, but there's no reason these days when, I mean, for instance, for the intensive care project, we broke people down into different groups of specialities because we knew they were going to have their own opinions, and we were able to capture that information via the whiteboard, etc. And then we turned all of that into visual management, and then that was the mirror back, but also it mirrored to the different specialities what the other people had seen. So face to face or virtual is okay, but the bit that's important is sharing back what people have told you so that they can see that they've been heard, or they won't want to move on to the next step.
Very good, very good. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question. I'm going to move on to Megan. Were you in a group on with somebody?
The question we have is, with the influence model, how would you recommend adapting that to different organisations?
Well, you don't. That's a good question, and the answer is you don't have to, because people are people. And I used it in a heavy manufacturing environment, and I trialed it in the NHS to see if it worked. And the fact is that people always want to see role models, and they will always emulate what their leader is telling them. They always need to understand what's asked of them and how it makes sense. Systems and processes and procedures always need to match people's working environments, and people are always going to need the skills and competencies to do the job. So it's a universal tool, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Me and Alison was in a group, and we had quite a bit of discussions around the importance of the behavioural change, which is we thought almost the biggest challenge really to get everybody on board. So so we were wondering, was there a specific turning point in the process where you sort of got the people, or all clinicians and others all needed? Was there a turning point when you got them on board in your change?
It's a gradual process, and if you're engaging often and meaningfully enough, it's organic. So always when we start to go out and engage, people need to tell you about their past experiences and what they're happy or unhappy with. And then as you build trust and you build relationships with people, you become more, the business change team know they are well embedded and have full visibility and are seen as part of the team when we're being invited to the regional team meetings, and we are fully included. And then there will be a gradual shift. See if I can remember the way that I term it. So it starts off with usually skepticism and suspicion, and then it moves into sort of wary anticipation, and sort of an excitement starts to build, and it's all about you. We look for quick wins. So if we start to get things fixed for them, if what we say happens, becomes so, and gradually you, by earning trust in all the same as it is in your own personal life, then people begin to accept your expertise, and over time then things shift, and by the time you get to implementation, you should be firmly have the trust and support of the people that you're trying to help. And if you haven't, you need to go back and revisit what you've done. We just thought that behaviour changes is really key to being able to implement this whole process. I don't know if you agree with that. Absolutely. As I think I said, it doesn't matter how good the system is. If you haven't taken the people with you and they don't feel consulted and what they've asked for hasn't appeared, then they will resist, and that's why transformations fail. And that's also why sort of sometimes you get a big bang to something and then appetite trails off, because if you're not there supporting them, making those changes, fixing those glitches, then people will just go back to what they were doing before. So people, for me, definitely, and Wendy there, and it's certainly in my top left, is the person that made that decision to change the trainers from traditional classroom trainers into change ambassadors that went out into the community and focused completely on the people side of change.
That's why I agree, Harriet.
Definitely.
I mean, this is a huge mountain to climb, rolling it out across Wales. Is there any, do you talk with NHS England, Scotland at all? Or?
Yes, absolutely. There's never any point in reinventing the wheel. And by the same token, if somebody's done something before and there's lessons to be learned, but we collaborate often, and certainly during the COVID crisis, the directors were in constant communication with England and Scotland, I'm not sure about Ireland, if I'm honest, but certainly England and Scotland, we were, yes, absolutely.
It's good to chat, isn't it, and collaborate. Yeah.
And the lovely thing, Wales is smaller, which has meant that we've done, without blowing our own trumpet, we've achieved far more in some spaces, because whilst 3.12 million people seems like a lot of people, it's not at the same scale as England. We've sometimes got further with digital solutions and vice versa, and that's where we learn off one another. And when we've needed to expedite things quickly, that's never been more important.
In one sense, I guess if it works really well in Wales, you can become the role model for England and
yes, and I think the portal, Welsh Clinical Portal, I mean, you don't live and breathe it like we do, but there are lots of firsts in there. Cross-boundary sharing of information, the fact that the test results that have been done in the CTU goes to the patient record, there's things in there that mean that after this crisis, thanks to the digital solutions, we will have a full picture of people's health, and it will be in one place. And there's still lots and lots to do. It's by far, it's not the finished product, but you fall over and break your leg in Conwy, when you come back to Cardiff, that clinician will be able to see whatever's happened to you.
Tell us a little bit about the track and trace, how difficult it's been to implement that, and and the app, the influence of the app. Do you know much about that?
I think there was recently something on Twitter, Wendy might be able to help me here, where we've managed to integrate the app so that a token is sent to the person that's had the test. And the difference between ours and England is that people are getting information whether the test is positive or negative, and then they're able to update their app with this information, which then influences how the tracing takes place. So that's an innovation that's relevant from the patient side of the app. But the app that I was talking to you about is the service for the traces of the app, and that it's difficult to articulate how hard that was and how big it was, but it was a Public Health Wales initiative, but all the technical expertise, we had to go out to market for that first, don't forget. So there was lots of people that we needed to consult to see what solution we were going to use, because we didn't have time to develop our own. And we ended up, I think, with Microsoft Dynamics as the provider. But all of the knowledge that NWIS has from an infrastructure and architecture perspective, and how all these systems talk to one another, was what Microsoft needed. And we didn't realise how much Neil was going to become such a subject matter expert, because you can test scenarios as much as you like, but when you're building the e-learning for it, you're firmly walking in the shoes of the people that are using it. And he, time and time again, has found, whilst he's building stuff, that's not working right. And it gone back to the test team, and we've been able to fix so many things before it's become too much of a problem. But then I think there's a basic tracer, and then it gets escalated up again to somebody with clinical information, then it gets escalated up again. So he's built e-learning in all of those three spaces. But the way that we've been able to configure the system means that we are now, I think, in our next iteration, looking at how we're going to tackle hotspots or surges in certain areas. And the way that we've configured the telephony as well as the system, and this is, I don't know if I'm talking about a vision or an actual at the moment, to be very clear, but we think we can move people en masse to be able to deal with these surges, which means that we shouldn't have that backlog of test results waiting to happen, as has happened in England. And as long as we've got the people on the ground to do the poking up the nose, then we know that we've got the technical solution to be able to trace these people.
I think that's a bit of vision and actual.
Yes,
it's on a bit of a roadmap there, Harriet. And I think the other thing to add in, and I think I'm correct in all of this, is in Wales is the only country that the results are going back into the records as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got another question on the chat, and it was a question asking, what happens if someone breaks their leg climbing in Scotland? Does that record come back, and how does that happen?
Interesting. So at the moment, I think the straight answer is no, it would travel by post, but we are working with people that are very close to our Welsh boundaries now, and we are working with our English and not English, but Scottish English colleagues, so that they can have access to the Welsh Clinical Portal, because the closer you are to the border, the more likely you are to migrate across it to different hospitals. So it's very important that we have that interface, which means that just because you know, sometimes you're millimetres on a map or miles on and that just means that we lose visibility of you. So that is happening all along our borders, because we want to be able to share the record everywhere.
So if you think of Powys, they don't have a DGH, they don't have a district general hospital in the county, so lots of them go over to Hereford, and it's wider. There's been wider issues to resolve than interoperability and getting over, but actually that's been part of it, and they are working hard with NHS Digital to ensure that they can come back into the Welsh Clinical Portal.
Yeah. And I think as well, let's think about the remote aspect of it. I remember Rydian talking to me recently, he was our clinical director, saying now that if he's on call for ED and somebody phones up with a question, he can actually look at those notes at home and make decisions whilst he's hopping into the car to go and treat them. And, you know, if you've got somebody with a heart attack and they're on warfarin and you don't know they're on warfarin, what are you going to do with them? So there's real life-saving interventions that are possible because of having access to this information. And from patients' perspective, that referral black hole that you was referred to a consultant and nobody knew where you were until you got your letter. Well, now the GPs can see the status of that referral by looking at the read-only view of WCP. So there's, you know, when you read it out, it means nothing. When you put it into context, it's everything.
Yeah. There's huge efficiencies actually that can be achieved as well. You know,
yes.
So obviously it's
not rebleeding people, not re-x-raying people, all of those things.
From the GP point of view as well, you know, actually doing the Zoom call or whatever you use, the Teams call to actually have the consultation.
Yes, absolutely.
Saving a lot of
Because
time.
I heard this week that there was a nurse-led clinic, and the clinical lead was saying that she'd only had 2 DNAs, so 2 did not attend since last April because they were telephone conversations. And she was really surprised that people were taking the calls, though, in supermarkets, on holidays, etc. But since April, only 2. Now, you would need to go back in history to see this time last year how many DNAs did she have in her clinic when people were expected to pitch up at wherever her clinic was.
Yeah. It's much better and much more efficient, isn't it? Yeah, generally.
And it also, I mean, another development from the portal is the outpatient continuation sheet, because virtually you were losing, if they were speaking to one consultant, you couldn't see what that consultant had done without getting the notes. There's been those kinds of initiatives that have meant no matter who they see, who they speak to, where they speak to them, people can see the latest thing that has happened to that person from their remote position.
Are people still nervous about security though? And, you know, security of their information. So now that we're doing this online a lot more, having those calls with the consultant online, is that more of an issue than it was?
The answer is I haven't seen any of that. There was I think a period of 3 years due diligence that went in before we looked at things like Microsoft Teams. We had to do a lot of research around where things were going to sit in the cloud. And then if you go back to our security, when we beat WannaCry, our cybersecurity team are red hot, but in the wider NHS, there was a massive amount of work done to protect people's patient information, and certainly I haven't heard of any breaches of that. But
no, I don't think there's been many breaches. I think there have been a couple, and I can think of a couple, but I think we still need to make sure that people trust the NHS with their data and information. There was a recent patient information survey, and I only know this because I've done a presentation this week on it, and from a patient information forum over COVID, and what they were saying though, not so much about their security of data, but actually so much information was out there they didn't know what to trust. And actually a lot of people perhaps didn't get into the system or talk to the system because they didn't know there was lots of conflicting information.
Yes,
so I still think there's a lot of end user research to be done in terms of informing our citizens that their
and you get tarred with the same brush, don't you? Yeah, you know, it goes down in Twitter or Facebook or something, and then suddenly nothing's safe. And we've had to do it because Microsoft Office 365 wasn't built for healthcare, so the team went into a lot of discovery around what confidentiality looked like in the team space.
Definitely. There was another question, just one last question, and then we'll have to wrap up. Is the tracking app auto stored on your phone? Was the question. I think the answer to that is no. You're talking about the track and trace app?
The answer is I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was told by somebody, and it's when you open your phone, it's auto stored by the Welsh government, and but I'm not sure about that.
Auto stored or auto installed?
Auto installed on your phone.
Oh, I wouldn't have thought so. As far as I'm aware, you download the app from the App Store, and you would have to put in a password that meant that is the way that you give permission for something to be stored on your phone. So if you're saying is somebody covertly installing an app on your phone, no.
Okay, because if like people, they don't download the app, how can you track the people who, you know, have the same thing?
You can't.
You can't.
So can that person be forced to download the app?
No.
No.
Being responsible, but also you see now when you go to Costa Coffee, they won't serve you until they've seen you enter the tracing information. So it's around the responsibility of the individual and the responsibility of the businesses to make sure that they gather as much data as possible under whatever requirements they're under, and then it's your personal responsibility about whether you choose to download the app.
Yeah, because so far I know there's quite a few cases in the colleges and primary school, secondary schools in Swansea, but the things we can't, you know, like nobody know where they've been and who they contact with, and for the people we worry about that we can't even have the information, the website or anywhere to find the information. How can I look?
So I know that Welsh citizens, so once somebody tests positive for COVID, then they enter into the tracing system that I was talking to you about, and they will be speaking to a contact tracer who is going to map all of the contacts that they've had. So, and certainly the feedback is from the articles that I've read that Welsh citizens are far more forthcoming and are happy to say who they've been in contact with and when and where. So we have had lots of successes about back tracing and identifying, and I think the next phase of the app is actually to trace the source of the source. So at the moment, it's getting better and better all the time.
Yeah, that's what I say, you know, like people's memory, it's like you can store long-term memory, but it doesn't mean you can remember every single person you contact. Yeah, so
I agree.
It's not a perfect system, but it is trying to reach as many people as possible. Okay, so we're gonna close now. I want to say thank you to everybody who's come today. Thank you especially to Harriet for answering all of our burning questions, and thank you for all chatting in the rooms as well.